Hello everyone and welcome to Thermal Control Magazine's interactive session on cold chain opportunities in post-COVID market. Cold chain remains an integral part of any industry, whether it's storage and transportation of fruits and vegetables, processed food, dairy and ice cream, pharma and healthcare or hospitality. However, according to the recently published India Cooling Action Plan, while India has a large inventory of cold storages or refrigerated warehouses, the remaining elements of cold chain infrastructure like pack houses, reefer transport, and ripening chambers are largely missing. Thus, there's a huge business potential in this industry. On this note, today we have come together to witness an engaging interactive session on cold chain opportunities in post-COVID market. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege for me to introduce you to today's distinguished speakers. Mr. Vikram Murthy, Director Univac Environment Systems, Mr. Harshal Surange, Director and CEO ACR Project Consultants Private Limited, Mr. Parth Thakkar, Director Paulfrost Aircon Private Limited, and Mr. L.N. Krishna, Regional Head Hotspots, Key Accounts, Communications and Industry Affairs, Danfoss, India.
Mr. Vikram Murthy, you were talking about the digital tools, railway and next and technology integration. How do you evaluate recovery of market trends as well as implementing digital technologies such as AI or cloud or predictive maintenance for evolving cold chain opportunities, and also what the industry expects now?
Okay.
Mr. Vikram.
Right. So I will attempt to answer this question by picking one type of transportation, which is rail transportation, end-to-end delivery of a container. Let's talk about the container. A container is loaded at one end and it reaches the other end in a fixed period of time. And we add to this many things on top of it. One is the price realization has to occur because it is delivered to a customer at the other end. And so you can have pay before or pay later or pay through a process. The most important thing, of course, is the maintenance of that product, quality and temperature and so on. So you can have continuous monitoring using digital sensors and tools and use artificial intelligence and the internet to continuously give you the process parameters, all the end-to-end thing. And the other important matter is in all of this is the ability to be able to transport in time. So there has to be a process where you can book and you can load and will move, and all of that also has to be part of some integrated process. So this is what I would like to say now. It's not yet perfect, but it is certainly the tools are there to make it good, and the railways are quite used to getting technology into their business as they do for passenger booking. They can surely do it for this type of thing also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vikram, for touching that on the transportation preference for that. Mr. Krishna, coming to you, uses of refrigeration and innovative equipment and refrigerants in cold chain is becoming a core issue. As climate concerns are emerging in COP26, that is underway till 12th November. And you touched down upon the 5 pillars also and talking about the self-sustainable goals and other things. So could you elaborate upon untapped opportunities in the cold chain refrigeration industries? What probable ideas need to be addressed for future sustainability of refrigeration industry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gopal. So that's probably the way forward that we have to look at when we are talking of reimagining the industry, because at the end of the day, it's something that we can't live without, as refrigeration is increasingly becoming an aspect which is part of our life. I mean, whether we can't live without it. At the same time, it is also a sector which is contributing in different ways on climate change, because it definitely induces heat into the atmosphere. The refrigerants are chemical in nature. So as people who have been working in the industry, it is up to us to understand which are the places where we could look at it immediately, which are our low-hanging fruits, and which are the areas where we have to work on from a long-term, medium-term perspective. Now, in some areas, India is already a leader in terms of adopting natural refrigerants. Like if you look at some of the large cold storages that are available, India already uses 90% of our cold storages are on ammonia, which is a natural refrigerant. And it is important for us to continue in that direction, because what is also happening is ammonia being a toxic in nature, and with urbanization coming into play, there are issues coming that there are communities that have come around these large industrial refrigeration units, and question marks being asked on is it safe to use ammonia? And that's where you have these safety standards in place. And that's where also you have some of these low-hanging fruits where you could start looking at some other cascade systems. I'm sure Mr. Harshal has already worked on some of these projects in other places, where you could look at these options so that you don't move away from something you have done well already and move into a direction which is not good for the climate, but it is something that you are doing it because you know you do not have an alternative, but there are alternatives available. Secondly, there are some other options that are available, like in the dairy sector, you have your bulk milk chillers. They're all largely running on HFCs, but that's an area where industries and companies need to work together to understand what are the other options that are available. And they need not necessarily be only on the refrigerant aspect, because while refrigerants are one part of the solution that we could look at, the other parts are on energy consumption. How can you reduce the energy consumption? How can you make them independent of the grid? How can you combine renewables with energy storage? And that's something that I'm happy to say that we are working with some startups in that space. And these guys who are very young are coming up with some very simple solutions. I mean, they are using ice as an energy storage device and trying to cool. And it sounds quite simple, but and when you look at it, the solution is also simple. But they have been able to come up with those solutions. So each of these, I would say that we have to look at it, and there are options that we will come forward with.
Yeah, Mr. Krishna, thank you so much for detailing this aspect. So again, Mr. Anwar Sheikh immediately texted you, dear Mr. Krishna, we are working on natural refrigerants. Can you share your contact details so we want to reach out to you? In addition to that, when in your initial submission, you were addressing that along with the growth of cold chain, even it's also impacting the carbon footprint. It is parallelly growing. So you spoke about the effective utilization of solar possibility in cold chain. Do you want to also share what kind of probably research initiatives are happening around the globe in terms of eco-friendly cold chain?
Yeah, see, in terms of research, as Danfoss, which I think I have kind of touched upon in my earlier talk as well, we have kind of are working with research institutes in India. These are all leading research institutes, and the recent one is with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, where we are trying to work with them and understand what are the low GWP and natural refrigerant options that we could look at, both from a commercial refrigeration and an industrial refrigeration point of view. And some of these are technologies which have worked well probably in climates like Europe and other climates, but India is unique in itself in terms of India has 5 different climatic zones, and we need to understand how do we bring those technologies and sometimes probably do some reverse innovation and work with a lot of stakeholders here, because at the end of the day, you need an ecosystem in India. Just having a technology in India will not help us to take it anywhere, because the technology can be available. But unless you don't have your ecosystem here who can work with the technology and take the technology into the market, the technology will continue to remain on the shelf. And to me, that is where societies like ISHRE are playing very important role, in getting all the stakeholders in and educating them, doing a lot of skill building, bringing a lot of youth into the sector. And that to me is very critical, because as we move forward in this industry, for business model innovation to happen, we will need a lot of young blood here. A lot of startups will come in, and we are already seeing a lot of investment coming in to startups who have started, and that's very good, and that's the direction I see moving forward, where industry, private sector, the research institutes will all collaborate together, and it will be a good PPP model.
Yeah, that is very, very optimistic. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishna. Coming to Mr. Parth Thakur, one of the participants, again, Mr. Sheikh, asked a question. This is about solar cold rooms. So can you address this aspect? How much is the success of solar cold room in India? Any designs of cold rooms where we can use R290 or carbon dioxide or water as R404A or R22 are very high GWP refrigerant and will obsolete soon. So he also shared his view. Do you have any observation to share with us?
So there are multiple points here. One being success of solar cold rooms. Second being the opportunities of using low GWP refrigerants. And both the points are quite individualistic, and I would like to answer them one by one. First of all, solar cold rooms as a success in India is not dependent on one single farmer going in and buying that cold room, because he simply cannot have the buying capacity or the capital to do so. In a country where they are committing suicides, definitely he'll not think of buying a cold room ever. So that's not where the solar cold room success lies. It lies in farmer producer organizations, where the multiple farmers, they come together. They have their own plan where they do their decision making based on the multiple capacities or the strengths that all of them combined together have. And it also depends on the investment coming in into this segment of reducing the farm level wastage. So like organizations like WHO and other internationally acclaimed bodies who work on vaccination in the African countries, so that the death rate reduces, so that they are not exposed to too many diseases, so that they can get vaccinated better by the use of cold chain. Success of solar cold rooms going into the farm level also depends on such investment coming into countries like India, where the farmer is not a rich person, but he is basically the provider and he himself has nothing. So that's where the success of these kind of cold rooms lies. And as far as solar cold rooms in the industrial segment goes, industry is much capable of doing investments into solar and combining that with the refrigeration. Of course, the solar power generation cannot alone handle the power requirement of the refrigeration equipment that is put into the cold room. But then solar combined with thermal backup and solar combined with temperature what we can say preservation techniques can definitely give some load reduction or some lesser dependency on the mains or the power grid. And in places where cold storages and blast freezers are installed in excess capacity and production is lesser, but they have huge facilities, there are rooftops which are also able to generate a lot of solar and then feed into the grid based on the net metering practices which are allowed by the power discoms. So there are multiple opportunities as far as integrating solar goes with the refrigeration. And the second topic of increasing low GWP refrigerants, I think Mr. Krishna has spoken a lot on it. And there are various ways and means of including low GWP refrigerants into our processes. Of course, the industry is not very aware. When I say industry, I mean the consumer industry who is using the refrigeration equipment. And today our focus is too much on capex as compared to opex and as compared to the GWP effects of these refrigerants. And until our mindset does not change from being a capex oriented thinking to environment oriented thinking or to an OPEX oriented thinking, there is no changing the ways and means of how the industry works. So it's a long way to go into these low GWP refrigerants, and of course some government rules and regulations coming in can always help a lot. Like if we see into the puff manufacturing sector, the blowing agents in the puff chemicals had traditionally been HFC gases. Those later on then pushed by the ozone cell are now moving towards non-HCFC and non-HFC also today. So we see our refrigerators and we see our deep freezers, which are manufactured by Blue Star and Godrej and all. They come with those stickers which say C5 or pentane or these stickers, which mean that they are basically used or they are basically formed by using non-HFC or non-HCFC blowing agents. It does not usually mean that pentane is the refrigerant inside in the refrigeration system. It basically means that pentane has been used as a blowing agent. So these changes are then pushed in by the ozone cell, which is a wing of the government. And if the ozone cell also pushes or takes such measures to stop the use of gases like R22 and all, that's when the use will finally stop. Of course, we may still keep getting them for maintenance of the existing systems, but the prices may go high and then people may be
absolutely
encouraged to use them for newer systems.
Absolutely, Mr. Fahad, and I hope, thank you so much, Mr. Anwar, for asking this question. Coming to Mr. Harshal, Mr. Arup Majumdar, thank you so much, Mr. Arup Majumdar, for asking this question as well. He was asking about an opinion on food retail. What's enabled this sector from a technology perspective?
See, food retail in the sense, if we're talking of the supermarkets, then there's a significant amount of work happening in supermarkets where display cabinets are being various kinds of display cabinets are available, frozen, chilled. In fact, today we are coming to a case where many malls actually have these small cold rooms which are inside the mall. So rather than a display cabinet, you actually just walk into a cold room, and over there you have those shelves where you go and pick up whatever you want and move ahead. So to that extent, yes, there's a lot of movement happening. There's a lot of movement in use of CO2 for these display cabinets as a refrigerant. So moving towards natural refrigerants, definitely that's one step ahead. And beyond that, as we develop the concept of having larger areas where cold chain is available at the food or at the sale point, that's where the more requirement is going to start coming up. So ideally, I would like to have a little more clarity on what exactly is needed as part of the answer. But if I've answered the question, it's fine.
Actually, I request Mr. Arup Majumdar, you can talk. I mean, you are allowed to talk now. Mr. Arup Majumdar.
In European countries as well as in US, we see that food retail is very well developed in terms of the temperatures which are maintained for different food items, and they have a lot of artificial intelligence and IoT devices also installed. It basically monitors the amount of food that has to be kept at certain points in the rack. So a lot of technology has gone in which is beyond what is used in traditional, what we call as refrigeration. So I was trying to get your perspective on how you see expansion of the refrigeration concept to taking electronics and more I would say electronic related applications into the application.
Okay, so there is, see, everything actually comes at a cost, right? In terms of technology, we have everything with us. We are pretty much at par with the world. We have the technology, but what lacks is the will to spend on that technology. You are able to give the best of the best solutions, but when it comes to the actual ordering, that's where you realize that, I don't have so much budget. Why not we do something a little lower than this and fit it within this budget? that is where we really need to move up as an industry, and we need to realize that if we want the best, then we need to be able to spend for it. Of course, when you spend for it, there is definitely a payback. None of these things are going to be, just a cost. It will definitely help you save power. It will definitely help you in getting the right the right life for your product. So the more you spend on this, it's not going to be just a cost. It's going to eventually pay back and going to give you a better life at the end of the day. But that kind of mindset really needs to come into the market today. And that's what we feel really, really lacks in a lot of people. I'm not saying everybody, but in a majority of people that we deal with, we find this lack of mindset that let's do the best and get the result out of it. That's something that we need to get.
And that is what that is, and just to follow up quick comment on that. That is one thing you can see that our industry, the refrigeration industry, is supposed to be very conservative. We are kind of slow to change, and the spirit of innovation that we see in other industries, that is a little bit on the low side as far as our industry is concerned. So it would be better for all of us to encourage the spirit of innovation, so that things which are essentially high cost or high price in other countries can be done in a lower cost model, or using disruptive innovation, as I call it, to provide the same kind of value which a high cost model can do.
Thank you, Mr. Majumdar. That's an excellent observation as well. Actually, Mr. Vikram Murthy would like to add something to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just adding something which I have observed in the same building where I'm staying in Mumbai. So there's a company called Big Basket, which is now part of a large group. So they have in our society, in all the buildings, there are 16 buildings here, 3 or 4 vending machines which are refrigerated. And they have food and they have ice cream and separate shelves, and they have weight sensitive platform. So if you remove something, you know that it's gone and it will replace it. But much beyond that, it not only does it maintain temperature and communicate with whoever is put it over there, but if I buy more ice cream, then I get an email or a message to say, go, this ice cream has come over there. They know what you're buying, they know what you're tracking, because there's an app to use that fridge. It's a lovely product. And so I think that this has nothing to do with the refrigeration industry. It's to do with electronics. It's to do with understanding. It is to use tools of how to communicate with the customer. So it's a little advanced, but it doesn't come at a very high price, because there is the consumer. The whole problem is you must have the consumer who's willing to pay that extra on a repeated buying process. So that's a great product, I would say, for refrigeration, which is well in use now in many buildings in Bombay. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I think Mr. Krishna also raised his hand to say something. Mr. Krishna, would you like to share? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on the food retail, I just wanted to kind of on Arup's question, because for us, food retail is an important part of the business when we look at it, but it's not. When we compare it with US or a European market, the kind of sizes of food retail that are there in those markets is very different to the kind of food retail we have here. And when we look at food retail in Europe, what we talk of food retail as a market there is the future power station for that particular city or for that particular state, because we believe there they will be able to produce so much energy, which they will not only be able to consume. With the technology change that is happening, the cars that come and park in a food retail, they will be able to use the energy being produced in the food retail to charge their electric cars, to heat your homes, and that's the way forward that you see. And comparing that kind of a food retail to a market like India, at least at this point in time, we do not see that as a business case. But food retail has a different opportunity in India, and that's slightly different to what we are talking.
Okay, so I hope Mr. Majumdar, we have addressed this question. I have an added follow-up conversation to build on this. Mr. Krishna, I would like to have your views on that. Mr. Parth was sharing about example of Amul and how it become, effectively utilize this channel. Do you see that, we can also develop technology that can bring these solutions at affordable cost for, say, interior Indias, like rural Indias? Whatever you spoke, Mr. Parth, is completely relevant for cities. Completely get that. But when it comes to interiors and rural areas of our country, how far it is affordable when these products are reached through cold chain, say, logistics? So, Mr. Krishna, would you like to address this? Yeah.
Are you speaking of a particular product or in general?
I'm talking in general, how we can make cold chain as an affordable solution. One point of view, Mr. Majumdar is also referring about the food retail. So I find that this is something what we need to discuss about the affordability aspect.
See, it's kind of the answer on a very high level from a macroeconomic point of view is quite easy, because you have about 30% or 40% loss that is happening, and you have X price that you are paying for a product, and let's say you are paying for 70 kg of apples today as against 90 or 95 kg of apples which will be available in the market. So obviously the price for the consumer will come down when there is a larger produce available at the market end, and the farmer gets a higher price because he is going to sell more. At a macroeconomic level, it becomes a very simple case saying that yes, it is. But when you get into a ground level, there are different aspects that come into play, because there is a cost element that comes in, added element on refrigeration and cold chain that comes into play. But what we have seen in many pilots that have been done within India is that cost, there is a price bracket that is available where people are willing to buy. And if you take the case of Kinu, which is one of the successful examples, where Kinu, which was being sold at less than 10 rupees in Himachal and Haryana, because there was a larger produce and they did not know where to sell it. They were connected to markets like Bangalore and Chennai. And today the same Kinu is available in these markets, and the consumer is willing to pay 70 rupees for the same produce, because you have connected the demand with the producer. So the demand is already available. Now, to answer your question whether the rural people will be able to afford it, here the people in Himachal and Haryana who are not getting income because they were not able to sell this, today have a larger income in their pocket. So with that income, they should be able to willing to spend for what they are willing to buy. So it's an economic circle that we have to kind of connect.
Completely good, sir. And
we also look at developing technologies which are kind of sustainable, which I think I have addressed, in terms of sector integration, renewable,
absolutely,
energy storage.
Absolutely. In the interest of time, I am interfering, and I request everybody to spare additional couple of minutes more to conclude this session. Before that, to add it to that, Mr. Krishna, like what you said, access to technology for food processing is also a very critical aspect, or probably maybe a government intervention to provide adequate support for growing as fast as many other allied industries.
So, like Mr. Krishna also rightly said, and like Mr. Vikram also rightly pointed out, that you need to have a consumer, and as long as you have the consumer, the cold chain is affordable. Because when you have the consumer and when you have mapped the food right into his pocket, I don't think there is a problem in paying for the cold chain, because it is giving you that quality, or it is giving you that thing which you were not able to access before. And at the same time, if you see people who say that cold chain is expensive, I don't think they understand the use of cold chain fully. At the same time, if we say that we cannot afford cold chain, we are doing things wrong in the first place, because cold chain is supposed to add value and make you earn better and not be as an additional cost. And like Mr. Harshal rightly pointed out, all the technology that is available today to use, which is more expensive than the technology that was there yesterday, has a particular return on investment, and it is making you save money somewhere or the other. But if you have the cost mindset where you don't want to spend more only, even if you're going to save money in the long run, then you will never feel that the cold chain is not expensive, or where the cold chain is the value addition to your supply chain.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Parth. And it was a privilege for us to host each one of you here. Like what Mr. Ramakrishna was saying, cold chain industry is not growing as fast as the allied industries. And one of the expectation, what Mr. Krishna was saying, adding to that, probably government intervention to provide soaps for growth of this sector is very critical and eminent. Mr. Vikramurthy, I request you to conclude this session in a minute or so.
I can conclude with, but I wish that Harshal will, because he really is in this business as a consultant. I only said the process and the protocols should drive the cold chain. That is my conclusion, but I wish that Harshal will add something more to this, if you don't mind.
Yes, surely. Mr. Harshal, please.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Is this sort of this is obviously the finishing statement. I'm just saying that as an industry, we see that this industry has tremendous growth. It has been consistently growing for many decades now, and the growth continues. Post-COVID, definitely we have seen that there is a significant increase in the interest of people for getting into this industry. What needs to be really understood is that it is a business model which is slightly different than the other industries. It is a high capital intensive industry. You have to put in a lot of money. Your turnovers are not so large. They are going to be smaller turnovers, but once the project has paid for itself, or once the loan has been repaid off, then you really start earning. So there is a gestation period of 5 to 7 years that needs to be given for this industry to really be in good shape. There is also a tremendous opportunity that lies in having a cold chain facility for yourself, buying the product, processing it, value addition, and selling it. End to end, if you're able to manage the entire scheme, or if you're an end-to-end solution provider, you have the maximum benefit, and you will definitely make a lot more money out of that scheme. I think that's what I would say.
Thank you, panelists, for exchanging your valuable thoughts on today's topic, cold chain opportunities in post-COVID market. We hope you enjoyed the session thoroughly. Before wrapping up today's session, we would like to thank our distinguished panelists, Mr. Vikram Murthy, Mr. Harshal Surange, Mr. Parth Thakkar, and Mr. Krishna. I'd also like to thank Mr. Gopal Anand and Mr. Prasad Nair for taking up this initiative. We would like our delegates and viewers to stay connected with us on our social media handles. Thermal Control Magazine is available on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Additionally, you can also download our app from Google Play and App Store. So with this, we'd like to announce the closing of our today's session. Request you to stay tuned for more such sessions. Thank you and goodbye.